From Washington, D.C. to the heart of America, welcome to Mark Alford's America. I'm freshman Congressman Mark Alford from Missouri, and I believe in America. I believe in you. And most importantly, I believe our greatest days are still ahead. You know, each week we take you behind the scenes to share the stories, news, legislation, to meet the great folks who help shape our nation. And today we're talking with Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. She proudly represents New York's 24th District. She's an accomplished attorney, longtime small business owner, and mother. She was first elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2016, and it was one of the most expensive races in the nation. Right now, she serves on the House Ways and Means Committee, the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee. She graduated from Colgate University and the Taft College of Law and the University of Cincinnati. Please welcome Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. Claudia, good to have you here.
Hey, great to be here.
What made you want to get into Congress?
Well, it's not something I ever thought about doing. I was actually in the state legislature in my third term, and there was an opportunity to make my district smaller because I had been the worst victim of redistricting. At least my district was. It wasn't me. It was the people that were in it. So after the 2012 redistricting, I was in the longest district created in New York history, which was really difficult. And I looked over and I saw, there's a congressional seat that's a little smaller and fit my actual beliefs, and really had a representative who was not, I didn't think, adequately representing. I announced that I was going to run, and that representative decided not to run, and I ended up in a kind of a crazy race. And I had a three-way primary and a three-way general. So I, with the least resources of everyone, one of my opponents in the primary had almost $3 million. My other opponent had more than I did. Most of the money I had, I loaned to myself, and ended up winning that primary. So off I was to the general election, and actually had a billionaire's daughter as the Democrat and a near billionaire as the independent candidate, the Silicon Valley guy, run against me in 2016. It was the year President Trump was running. And it was very challenging. I didn't really get any help from NRCC and the Republicans until the fall. So they basically kind of bludgeoned me to death with millions in spending over the term, and we were able to squeak it out in 2016 and won my first term.
What did the race cost, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I had altogether, I think, in my district at the time, about $16 million was spent on the race.
Wow.
Which is one of the cheapest districts in upstate in New York. I mean, they literally, the Democrats and the independent candidate kind of ran out of places to spend money because they saturated the airwaves. But let me tell you what happened after that. I lost in 2018, came back in 2020, and another $15 million was spent in the 2018 race, and in the 2020 race, another $15 million was spent. So I've had almost about $45 to $50 million spent against me in my old district, which is one of the cheapest, really the cheapest media markets in the state of New York. But then we went through redistricting last year, as you know, and I got moved into the 24th district with part of my district going that way. 93% newer district, a little bit more Republican, and I had to come out and win a primary again and then win a general election. So that year wasn't as expensive, but one thing we did, and what I learned from the 2020 election, the pandemic election, where so many rules were changed by the Democrats to try to find ways to get people to vote. We bypassed all of our rules. The governor at the time, Governor Cuomo, made almost 100 changes to our election laws, making it nearly impossible for our election officials to even manage that election. So I started the Election Integrity Caucus in my first term of 2021, my new term, technically my second term, and really drilled down and trying to inform members of Congress and everyone about what to do with election integrity. So in 2024, not only did we win, we won by nearly 34 points because we employed the tactics that the Democrats had used, and used legal ballot harvesting and pushing early vote for Republicans to make sure that we got a really high turnout, and we had the highest turnout of any Republican in the state of New York because we actually did what the Democrats do, but we did it legally, and we did what we should be doing coming into this 2024 election everywhere we can to ensure that we win. But
election integrity is huge. Everyone wants to make sure that their vote counts, but the only votes that are counted are legal votes. And so how do we make sure that happens with this all-important election coming up for the House and part of the Senate and the President?
Well, as part of the Election Integrity Caucus, my co-chair is Mike Garcia, who is in a very vulnerable seat out in California, and he's been working with me. We've brought people in from all across the country, experts, even Democrats Like we've had some Democrat officials come in, secretaries of state, attorney general, election commissioners, people from all over, experts on election. J. Christian Adams and numerous others have come to our Election Integrity Caucus events and spoken with us on how we preserve and protect our sacred right to vote. Because really, that's what it's all about as a country. If we don't protect our right to vote for citizens to vote in every election, we are not going to have a system that's based on self-governance, which was the vision of our founders. And so that is what's so critically important. And so we work every day in the Election Integrity Caucus trying to get all the members on board. We've got about 70 members or so in our caucus. We would love to get Democrats as well. And we have a lot of Democrats that are interested, but because they are, so partisan here in Washington, we can't get them to actually join the caucus. But
do they not want election integrity?
Well, the ones that lose in New York City under suspicious activities that we see often in Democratic elections when they face each other in primaries, like, we need election integrity.
Right.
Well, yes, join our election. I might say that some of those people who want to join now have lost their primaries in New York City. So, we all want election integrity, and we want, and it's often you hear this false mantra from the left that Republicans are trying to suppress the vote. We don't want people to vote. Let me tell you what I've learned as someone who's been in tough races and has been really doing a deep dive into election integrity. The more people that vote, the better it is for not only for self-governance, but it turns out that the more people that vote, the more Republicans win elections. So when Democrats bring up this, we want to suppress the vote, why would we want to when all the evidence shows that when we turn out in high numbers, Republicans win? So not only do we want that for self-governance, we want everyone to turn out who's a legal citizen. Remember, we're fighting off non-citizen voting in New York, and they are in some other areas. But election integrity is paramount, but we need to do everything we can because the Democrats under Joe Biden have undermined our ability to actually have true elections where people actually know who they're voting for. And I'll give you an example. In the 2020 election, Mark Zuckerberg, the famous Facebook Meta billionaire, put over $400 million into swing district elections mostly. 90% or more of the money went to getting Democrats out to vote. That came under scrutiny. We went after that. I have a bill, the Stop Zuckerbucks Act. It hasn't been passed in the Senate, and it's, obviously with Chuck Schumer there, we're not going to go anywhere.
Right.
But what was interesting is Mark Zuckerberg backed out and decided not to fund elections that way. But Joe Biden did an executive order demanding and requiring government agencies, whether it's the SBA, the Small Business Administration, HUD, all these agencies are now going to be vote collection sites and vote harvesting sites for obviously Democrat-leaning type of agencies. And so we're fighting that. You voted against for an executive order, turning that executive order over. Thank you for your vote. It was an amendment we put in, and recently in our number of amendments we had over the time here. And so all these things are really important that we maintain integrity by not allowing vote harvesting to occur, but also by not priming the pump. And I'll give you a perfect example. If you take, and this is where Republicans need to be stronger, if you take 100 Democrats and put them in a room, all from Pennsylvania, we know they voted in the Democratic election of 2022, and you ask them, did you vote for John Fetterman? And they probably 20 to 30 of them would say, who is John Fetterman? And that's the problem we have in elections. People are picking up their votes, finding people that are uninterested, disaffected, and they're voting for them, whether sometimes it's union groups or other big Democrat groups.
You mean
are
physically voting for them?
Well, they're collecting their votes from people who don't care and don't value their right to vote, which is why we keep trying to underscore the sacredness of our vote and how important it is. And we want to make voting great again. We want to make people understand that you getting out to vote is such an important event. The Democrats' election day goes on for a month now. And I know Republicans are reluctant to do early voting and those things. But we've got to combat this in every way. And as long as we can provide assurances that each vote's going to be protected, that one person, one vote, and that person who is voting is the person that's actually voting, and we don't get these groups funded by outside groups into 501c3s and 4s, creating this priming the pump to get more Democrats to vote. And I think people will understand as we head into a presidential year, the 2020 election, those 3 swing states decided that election.
Right.
About 40,000 votes was the margin. That's what decided our presidential election in 2020, and look at the devastation. I was worried about the damage that would be done by Joe Biden and his administration in the 4 years. It was destroyed in 1 year. Look at the border, our inflation, all these things that have happened. And all that because of 42,000 votes and the Democrats' superior vote processing and not really focusing on policy. And Republicans need to not only focus on policy, we have to get the process and we have to be competitive with them. And that's what we're working on with election integrity. Sorry to take so much time on
No,
that.
this is good. I can tell you're very impassioned about it.
It's a critically important issue as we go into the next election.
Hey, we're going to continue our conversation with Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. We're going to talk about the censure of Jamaal Bowman today, the ways and means, what they're doing to investigate Hunter Biden, and should Joe Biden be impeached? Mark Offers America continues after this. Welcome back, everyone, to Mark Alford's America, where we give you a behind-the-scenes look at D.C., letting you meet some of the fantastic, interesting people who I work with each and every day. And today, one of those is Congresswoman Claudia Tenney here in our office on the 5th floor of Longworth Office Building. Claudia, thanks so much for being here. This week, we censured someone from your delegation from New York State, Jamaal Bowman. Why was it important that we send that message and censure this member of Congress?
Well, I think it was the least common denominator there. I think he certainly deserved expulsion based on the standards we use to expel George Santos at this point. When we look at what Jamaal Bowman has done, the fact that the Ethics Committee did not take up an investigation into Jamaal Bowman, and we know that we have, I know this is a controversial topic, but we do have people who were innocently walking around the Capitol grounds or even in the Capitol building who are actually in prison,
right,
in some in solitary confinement for interfering with an official proceeding.
And here, this, in case folks don't know who Jamaal Bowman is, I should have said this. He is the guy who we were voting on government funding, and he pulls the fire alarm at our building next door here in Cannon, supposedly to get out a door that's locked, but we know from the video that was not the case. It was to disrupt and delay the vote to fund the government.
Right. He was not shy about that. He almost admitted it, but he was charged with a crime.
Right.
And he pled guilty to it. George Santos, whether you like him or not, everything he's done was abhorrent, the things that at least we know of. But he did not submit himself to the Ethics Committee, which he is not obligated by law to do. So he did not get to provide a defense. He did not get to cross-examine witnesses, which is what all of this is what's called due process. He did not get to do that in front of the Ethics Committee because he has to do that in a court of law. His trial is coming up, so he hasn't been convicted. We've had other members of our delegation lie, for example, or not delegation, of our Congress. We had Adam Schiff perpetuate a hoax, very dangerous hoax against the President of the United States as the chair of the Intelligence Committee, as someone who used...
This is about the Russia disinformation.
Created all the, continued to lie to the American people, where it exposed the security of our nation, where it hurt American citizens, it hurt the ability of an American president to carry out his duties, and yet he was only censored. We had a former member, Charlie Rangel, who really built and stole and was convicted of stealing millions of dollars in tax fraud from the American people. And yet he was only censored by the House of Representatives. So even though George Santos is going to have his day in court and will likely and deservedly go to jail, that was not something that I think we could have done. And by the way, the House Ethics Committee did not vote to expel George Santos. That was our own doing by our own members. So when we get to Jamaal Bowman, he actually pled guilty to a crime, but we should have investigated this very serious issue because I think there's a double standard. If you're a Republican and you had pulled that fire alarm, let me tell you something. You would be facing criminal charges and would have been expelled if it had been a Democrat majority. And so we can't have this double standard in our own house and then go to our constituents and say that we don't have one. At the very least, we at least censored Jamaal Bowman. He probably should have been expelled if we're going to use the same standard that we used with George Santos. And I think wrongfully, but this is where we are. And this is, while we're doing this, by the way, George Santos hurt Republican donors. And I don't remember Democrats talking about how wonderful Republican donors are, these millionaires and billionaires that they don't like. And I think George Santos appears to be very guilty, should serve time in prison, should pay the price to society for making false statements, for cheating. But nonetheless, we have a country that is engaged with danger and insecurities around the world. We have a border that's overrun. So I think there's a lot more important things we can be doing, but these are important things when we deal with the ethics of our committees, our ethics committee, and the ethical character and the ethical behavior of some of our members.
Speaking of ethics and crime, you're on Ways and Means investigating, from your standpoint, the tax records, the IRS whistleblowers, all around Hunter Biden. His take, this money that he's gotten, that he's channeled through the Biden crime family. There are checks that directly link it to his father, the big guy, the vice president at the time, Joe Biden. Where's the latest on this investigation?
Yeah, and finally we were able to expose this. But talking about liars and people who lie about their resume, there isn't probably a bigger liar ever to serve in the modern era than Joe Biden. He is the president of the United States, lied about just about everything in his resume. He was charged twice with plagiarism. It disrupted a presidential campaign he had in the past. So lying aside in resume building, those are not necessarily criminal offenses. But what is happening and what we have been able to expose through the whistleblowers, excellent witnesses, by the way. We did a closed-door hearing where we revealed the testimony and new documents where Joe Biden was using an alias to communicate as Vice President of the United States with Hunter Biden's actual business associates, all coordinated with trips on Air Force Two to Ukraine, China, with his son, all coordinating these alias emails that had been linked to Joe Biden. We haven't been able to get the contents of them because, of course, they're being slow-walked by the Department of Justice, by the National Archives, and we have Department of Justice officials who refuse to come before our committee to testify about what they know. And so they're all obstructing, and yet the Democrats are trying to obstruct us getting to this important information about Joe Biden, which shows payments from the Chinese Communist Party entity, an energy company owned by them, through other Hunter Biden type entities, the Owasco Holdings, for example, named after a lake in my district, by the way. So that money was actually distributed to Joe Biden, some of it after he was president, but all of the situation that was created with, leveraging his position as vice president and the Biden family name was all created while he was vice president and cultivated while he was vice president, not to mention the extortionary measure. Hunter Biden was on the board of Burisma that was being investigated by the prosecutorial team in Ukraine to try to clean up the corruption in Ukraine. And Joe Biden was bragging about having the prosecutor fired for doing that. And Joe Biden was vice president. Hunter Biden was receiving $100,000 a month from Burisma. At the time, Jim Biden, Joe Biden's brother, was receiving $65,000 a month. If this is not a conflict of interest, money laundering, bribery, extortion, all of impeachable offenses, we will consider this impeachment inquiry and get to the rest of this information next week. And I hope that all Republicans and some Democrats go along with us and vote for this.
What's the implications for our nation, the security of our nation? Because I believe this is the most compromised president in the history of our great nation.
I agree with you, and I've never seen you could compare every scandal from the beginning of our country till now. Nothing compares to what's happened under Joe Biden, but yet the media and the Democrats are trying to sweep it under the rug. They tried to claim that all they talked about in our hearing the other day was, we had a tough speaker vote, which, by the way, is a good thing, that we're actually willing to consider other things, that we actually work amongst ourselves. And that, Nancy Pelosi had just complete solidarity with her delegation when she had a narrow majority, but she abused power, and they all went along with it. We aren't willing to abuse power. We are going through constitutional means. We're letting the facts lead us to what has to happen. We are exposing Joe Biden, but we are being obstructed by our own government, the FBI, the Department of Justice. Operatives there are preventing us from protecting the American people. And here's Joe Biden, compromised by one of our biggest adversaries, you could call an enemy, China, the Chinese Communist Party specifically, the Russian under Putin, invading Ukraine, intimidating people in the European countries. I mean, this is a really dangerous situation we're in. And we have a president who's accepting money, using his son and his family. This is all about Joe Biden, by the way. It isn't Hunter. This is a president using his name and his family to enrich himself and his family. And we are getting the receipts between James Comer, who was head of our oversight committee, Jim Jordan, and Jason Smith in Ways and Means, where, by the way, we have oversight over this. We are getting to the answers here, and this is not good. Joe Biden needs to be removed. We need to have legitimacy. We need to secure our presidency.
Will he be impeached?
Unfortunately, the Democrats have no moral standards, as we can tell. They did not. Many of them did not vote on Jamaal Bowman today. Only 2 Democrats voted to censor.
So you think he won't be impeached after all this?
I think if we can put the evidence out in the impeachment inquiry, it's going to be very hard for vulnerable Democrats who are running for re-election in the Senate to not hold this trial. Let's see what happens.
Claudia, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, folks. Until next week, remember, I believe in you. I believe our best days are still ahead of us, and I believe in America.